The following stories are from the subreddit Paranormal. As far as I know, they're all true. Story 1. A little backstory. My grandma had a heart attack a few weeks ago, and I've been living with her since it happened, until she recuperates. I've always had certain sensitivities to the other side, which I inherited from my dad. I have what's called major depressive disorder, which, to the uninitiated, causes long spells of anger, sadness, as just a general depression. The past few weeks I've had one of the worst episodes in a while. This one was weird because my intrusive thoughts telling me to hurt myself seemed like more of a separate voice than normal. I began to have weird dizzy spells that I would almost pass out and drop, and then I'd snap myself out of it. My mental health continued to get worse. Meanwhile, my grandma began to have strange and vivid dreams. One, she swore up and down that her dog, a larger hound, had jumped up on her bed and was scratching at her face. In another, she saw who she thought was my younger cousin, wearing a weird mask with large glasses and jagged teeth. The other night, I decided to meditate and to open my eyes to the other side, so to speak. What I saw in front of me scared the hell out of me. It had huge eyes and incredibly sharp teeth. I began trying to take a couple of protective measures, creating a bubble of energy around me and holding it there. I talked to my dad about it, and he almost immediately began describing it to me. He says it looks like someone poured a tight latex mask over their head and cut open a slit for the mouth, black eyes and sharp teeth. He said it didn't like that we were talking about it, that it was growing and screaming at him. Just now, my grandma and I were sitting in the living room when multiple things fell off the shelf in the other room. If it were just playful, it would feel playful, but this gave me a pit to my stomach. Story 2. Before I begin this story, I would like to mention that yes, this story is 100% true, and I have only told a few people I am very close to. I want to start out with that because the events that took place almost seem as if they were taken from a movie. But they weren't. When I read most stories on this subreddit, I'm not much of a fan of backstories, but to fully grasp this story, I do have to go back a little bit. At the time of the story, I was 17 years old and working a part-time job at a local movie theatre. I absolutely loved working there. The managers were really laid back and the employees were super fun to work with. Me and two of my favourite ushers, people cleaning theatres, all worked the same shift from 5:30 to 10:15, except I was the closer, so I was to stay at work until 1 a.m, when all the movies ended and everybody left. Well, when we came in there was an ambulance and a big part of our lobby roped off and we all sat upstairs waiting to clock in, wondering what had happened. When we clocked in and got downstairs, we talked to somebody who had been working the whole day, and they told us that a man had died earlier that day due to what we believed was a heart attack. The whole event actually terrified us, but left us curious. Deaths in our area like that weren't common, so it was somewhat disturbing. Now this happened around the time a movie called Ouija was coming out. The coincidence that this happened was horrible, because one of my good friends had the idea of going to his house after work and bringing the Ouija board to see if we could contact this man who had just died. At first I decided there was no way I would play with it. Due to my religious beliefs, I knew that if we did play with the board, we could get into some horrible stuff. Yet I decided that we could just try it out, and if things got bad, we would end it quick. This is where things would take a turn quick. My buddy left and got the board. The managers usually sit in the office downstairs chatting and doing their closing routines. I rushed through mine that night so that we could see what we could find out. From the start, I should have known to stop playing with this horrible thing, but I never realized it. When we started, we couldn't get an answer. My buddy kept asking and asking, but as soon as I spoke, the piece moved. I asked a question like what my name was just to see if it would move. And it worked. Now I thought it was my buddies messing with me. I asked what the name of my girlfriend at the time was, and it answered correctly. Then, before I could speak, it gave off the name of a guy. At the time it didn't make any sense, but months later it was the name of a guy my girlfriend was cheating on with me. But at the time I didn't know the meaning of the name. We went on, and eventually, after enough personal questions, I realized it wasn't my buddies. Things only got worse. We started asking about the man who died there, and the board answered our questions. Towards the end of the questioning, the board began to act strange. Long story short, we soon found out that we hadn't got a hold of the man who had died. Instead, we got in touch with a demon. And the most haunting part about this was that the demon only answered to me. This demon had a specific liking to me. Before we were able to finish, we heard a manager walking up the stairs and quickly hid the board, and my two buddies hid as well. The manager came up, but didn't notice anything, and it was nothing for us to sit up in the upstairs. As soon as the manager left, my buddies bailed, saying they were too scared. And as was I. We had only forgot one crucial part of a Ouija board experience. We forgot to say goodbye. I never realized it until the next day, but I did know all the rules to a Ouija board. The next day is when things got bad for me. Again, this is all true, and it's the worst experience I've had in my entire life. The next day was a Friday night, and my parents had left to go out of town for a softball tournament with my sister. I hadn't thought any more on last night, since nothing had been added on top of it. Around 5 o'clock, I was sitting in my living room watching The Office, easily one of my favourite TV shows of all time, when, out of nowhere, the mood and feeling in my house changed. About as soon as I looked up, I witnessed a chair from my kitchen thrown across the room. I was in absolute panic. I ran out of my house, grabbing my keys and wallet sitting by the door, and went to my car, driving off. I went to the Walmart closest to my friend's house since it was a public place and I could gain my composure. After about a half hour of walking around, I decided I needed to get whatever was following me out of my house or out of my life. I spent the next hour and a half at a Starbucks researching all the things I could do. Luckily, at my local mall was a game store that sold Ouija boards, so I went and bought one. Now, I know playing with one alone is bad, but I had contacted my buddies to see if anything strange happened to them, but they didn't have anything happen. So I decided it was just me the demon wanted to talk to, and nobody else. So I took this back to my house with the intention of ending it there. A lot happened while I was playing around with the Ouija board, and I spent probably about 45 minutes talking to the demon who was now living with me. To keep this story short, I talked back and forth with this demon, and due to my religious background, I refused to give up against it. The demon at one point said, "Sell soul," but I refused to do that. I said prayers in my house, calling out to God to end it. Towards the end, there was silence on the board. I took my hands off the piece to Google what silence meant during a Ouija board session to see if I had actually gotten rid of the demon. But as soon as I took my hand off the piece, it flew straight to goodbye. I knew then that my mission was done, so I cut the board into 7 pieces and buried it outside my house. My parents don't know of this, and hardly anybody I know actually knows this story, but I felt like it could be shared here. Story 3. This has been a very long, haunting experience that has been going on for nearly 25 years now. It all started, as far as we know, when I was about 4 years old and my sister was 3. We were downstairs with our mum watching TV one night when I looked up and pointed to the stairs asking, "Who is that?" The stairs in the house were viewed from the side when in the living room, and all you could see was maybe enough to view someone's ankles and feet as they walked up or down the stairs. What we all saw when we looked up was a pair of little child's feet in black shoes and frilly socks standing there, facing towards us on the stairs. We were, of course, very weirded out. Jump forward 6 years, and I meet the ghost girl again. This time, in the bedroom I shared with my sister, now in a different house and town. I woke up one night to see her sitting on the end of my sister's bed across the room, just staring at me. I noticed she was wearing a Freddy dress, kind of old-fashioned and holding either a stuffed animal or doll. I was 10 years old, scared and tired, and just pulled the covers over my head and turned over to go back to sleep, and hoped that my dog sleeping at my feet would protect me if the ghost girl tried anything. After this, I haven't had any encounters with the ghost girl, but she hasn't gone away. Ever since then, this ghost girl has followed my sister around from house to house, and continues to do so to this day. Friends that have stayed over at our house growing up reported to us that they saw her during the night, and we had never shared the ghost girl haunting with them. They tell us that they saw the girl sitting at the end of my sister's bed, or standing in the corner and watching my sister sleep. She would never do anything than just stare at whoever saw her, or my sister. And she never said anything. Whoever she is, as long as she doesn't possess my sister and make her kill the whole family, I'm chill with her. Story 4. I've been working for a major movie theatre franchise for about 2.5 years now. Recently, I applied for a promotion to a management position. As much as I love the theatre I was at, I was looking to move up. Eventually, I got a call from a theatre that was slightly closer to my house, offering me the supervisor position I'd been seeking. Obviously, I took it. I've been there for about 3 weeks now. I like it a lot, but I went from working at the busiest theatre in the state to a significantly slower one. Instead of having one manager in each department, we're on a much smaller scale, so I'm HR, marketing, and projection, plus my daily duties. I wouldn't say I am a skeptic by any means. I believe in the paranormal, but I don't expect it to pop up all the time. I'm a very logical and rational person at the end of the day, and if there isn't any logic or science that I can apply, I then chalk it up to something paranormal. This wasn't like that. It first happened when I was headed upstairs on my first closing. As a closing manager, I can't leave the building until the last guest gets out of their movie. It was still fairly new, and it was our popular late-nighter, plus it's 2.5 hours long, so I was there late. I'm the only assistant manager, so there's an actual manager with me in the building, and we leave together. I was headed up and left my manager in the vault room downstairs as I transported some posters into the booth, where we have projectors and storage. I felt uneasy at the bottom of the stairs for some reason, and I looked up the stairs. I'm not easily spooked by any means, but I'm definitely made to feel uneasy easily, and we had closed down everything and sent all the crew home. Now, there were only 2 or 3 people in the last showing of it, and our janitors hadn't even shown up yet. No one could access the staircase but me and the other manager who had keys, but I kept getting the feeling that someone was going to emerge at the top of the stairs out of the booth. I thought maybe I was just tired and too lazy to take the stuff upstairs, so I dropped it off in the office and told myself I'd take care of it the next day. That first instance is honestly nothing. The second, though, made me think that something might be a little off. My manager and I were way behind. We'd had a slow night and had gotten preoccupied with side projects and hadn't focused on making sure that cash was taken care of. So now I was taking care of cash while she was across the building in the management office taking care of some paperwork. We had our radios to communicate, but this particular manager had a tendency to forget her keys and would instead knock on the cash room door, and I would let her in. I was actually listening to some YouTube horror narrators as I went through the cash getting our deposit ready, when there were 2 sharp knocks. They sounded like they were on the wall and not the door, but, without hesitation, I opened the door. No one was there. I grabbed my keys and stepped into the lobby where I saw my manager emerging from the office across the lobby. I called out that I think the janitors were looking for one of us. She replied that they hadn't gotten there yet. They were usually late. I asked if the last movie had gotten out. She'd said yes. I asked if she'd knocked just now. She shook her head. I joked that the place must be haunted. She looked at me and told me not to even talk about it. She's not a horror junkie. I've been ready to dismiss things until today. I came into work and clocked in, but was immediately stopped by my other supervisors who let me know that we didn't get coverage for a girl that quit, so we'd have to clean the theatres. I headed towards the office and was met with my closing manager, waiting at the office, door open, with a puzzled expression on his face. I asked him what was wrong. He said he could have sworn he'd just heard me whispering to myself right outside the door. The walls are very thin, and the door is right next to the table where he prepares his tea. He had thought he heard me and went to open the door for me since I didn't have my keys yet. I told him I'd been in the lobby with my other supervisor. He shrugged it off, but these encounters are getting more frequent. I am never there alone, but I am on the top floor by myself a lot, and it's a bit dark and creepy. I don't know if I'm still trying to convince myself that I'm imagining things or that it's anxiety from the promotion, but I just don't know. I guess I'll update if the encounters continue. Update. October 5th, 2017. 10:20 p.m. So, I just sat down in the cash room to get some work done. I boot up the computer and notice that one of the security camera footage feeds is going crazy. Like, the colours are saturating and unsaturating, and the picture does that old film kind of thing where it rolls the picture, if that makes sense. Like it's scrolling up. It started when the manager who told me not to joke about creepy things stepped into frame. She left, and the feed steadied. However, she just sat down, and it started shaking and moving again. It's very slow and skippy. It almost makes it look like all the employees are framed dolls with weird stop-motion joints. I feel like I'm freaking over nothing. These cameras are old and crappy. But I'm here until like 2 a.m. tonight, and I'm anything but at ease right now. Story 5. When I was 16, I landed a Sunday job washing pots in a pub in the next village where I lived. The pub was about 2 miles away. On my first day, I got up to find my bicycle had a flat tire, so I set off walking. I figured the quickest way there was to take a path that ran on the edge of some woodland between the two villages. On the other side of the path was a barbed wire fence that separated the woods from a boggy field. So I'm mooching along, minding my own business, when I started to hear shouting coming from about 70 to 80 yards into the woods. I couldn't see anything due to the bracken foliage and the lay of the land, but this was no ordinary shouting. It was people, maybe about 40 or so of them, proper screaming at the top of their voices. It was blood-curdling. I froze in terror, trying to fathom out who they could be. I couldn't make out any words they were roaring. The only explanation I could think of was that they were either football hooligans having a prearranged fight or squaddies on exercise. Neither of those explanations seemed likely. I had grown up in the area and been in those woods zillions of times, yet I had never heard anything like it. And then the banging and clanging started. It was metal on metal, metal on wood, and thumping noises. I wanted to climb the wire fence and run away across the field, but I had my best shoes on, and it would have meant I'd turned up for work on my first day with shoes caked in mud. Nevertheless, I decided that if the noises came closer, or I caught sight of anyone, then I was going to climb the fence and run. But then, the sound died down, but in a really odd way. It was like it faded as if someone had turned down the volume. Still shaken, but with much relief, I hurried along the path. The whole experience lasted about a minute and a half. As I made my way along the path, I turned a bend. Coming towards me were two old ladies with their little dogs on leads, happily chatting away. They just ignored me completely as we passed. Now, there is no way in the world that they heard what I did. They would never have been as perfectly composed as they were. The only explanation I can think of was that I heard an ancient battle. Story 6. Yesterday, at about 7 p.m., I was going to the grocery store with my mum. We were walking to the car and talking about something. I then hear some noise coming from down the street. It sounded like a kid playing with a ball or something like that. It was quite loud. I make a note in my head that it's a weird sound, but I keep talking to my mum as we're walking to the car. I look up and see a shadow walking behind what looks to be a small storehouse. We live in a neighborhood with apartment complexes. We keep walking, and I look back to see who the shadow was, and I see a person, a woman I think, who had a limp, and she was looking at me. No, she was staring at me, and she was walking towards one of the apartment buildings. I look away and keep walking behind my mum. I then turn around again and look at her, and she is still staring at me. There is something very off about her. Literally, half a second later, I tell my mum to look behind me, which she did, but she didn't see anyone. I was like, is there a woman looking at us? And my mum said, no. I didn't hear the front door to the apartment building she was walking towards open, nor did I see it close when I looked back the third time. It's one of those heavy doors that are loud when you open or close them, so if she did walk in, I definitely would have heard it, but I didn't. We got in the car, and I said to my mum, that was so weird. And she was like, yeah, but I didn't see anyone. I just heard a strange walking noise. I asked her, are you sure you didn't see anyone or see the door close? And she was sure. I let go of it because I figured it was just a woman with a limp and I had just imagined the uneasy situation. But here's the thing. There are several things that don't make sense. I realized later last night when I went to bed. First of all, there was something very off about this woman or person, and the situation in general. She was staring at me, and it made me feel very uncomfortable and uneasy. It was as if she was staring right into my soul, which maybe sounds funny, but bear with me. Second of all, if it was just a woman with a limp, my mum would have seen her. Or one of us would have seen the door to the apartment building close, since it all happened quite fast. This woman or person couldn't have been faster than us if it was just someone with a limp. Third of all, I didn't hear the door open or close, and neither did my mum. Maybe it was a person with a limp, and maybe it's just one of those things where your mind plays tricks on you. However, when I first heard the strange, quite loud walking noise that sounded like a kid playing with a ball, to when the woman or person was staring at me, to the point when my mum and I got into the car, I felt very strange. There was something very off about the entire situation from the beginning to the end. I don't think it was a person. The woman or person was dressed in all black and there was something strange about her face. I felt uneasy. She then disappeared, or that's what it seemed like because she couldn't have been faster than me and my mum if she had a limp. I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life, and I've never before seen this woman or person or thing. Thank you for listening to and or watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please go ahead and hit the like button. If you're not subscribing to my channel already, please do so. It really helps the channel to grow. I do hope to produce more videos more frequently for you. I just started a new job recently and it's taken up a lot of my time and energy, so I haven't been able to get in front of the microphone for a while now. If you enjoy my narration and you want to support me even further, please consider purchasing the audiobook I recently narrated, Punch by J.R. Park. It's a short horror around 3.5 hours long. It's available on iTunes and Audible. The link is in the video description below. Once again, thanks for watching. Her dismissive attitude was suddenly taken over by a sense of fear. No one else should be here, and she was certain she closed the door earlier. She picked up the phone from the side, and cautiously the teenager approached the door. She looked out into the night. The wind howled in her face and thunder gently rumbled in the distance. The back garden, however, was empty. With a sense of relief, Chloe slammed the door shut, this time taking care to turn the lock. Toby had been stood where he was called, watching the babysitter lock the door, when all of a sudden he began to bark wildly and growl. His large canines were shown in a display of aggression as he stared focused on the door. Bang, bang, bang. The door shook and rattled as someone started hammering it from the other side. Out of fright, Chloe jumped, dropping the phone, and ran behind the Labrador for protection. Bang, bang, bang. The sounds grew in volume as the blows increased with power. The door shook in its frame and threatened to burst from its hinges. Bang, bang, bang. Cracks began to appear down the body of the door, and the screws chimed as they bounced off the tiled floor. Chloe crouched to her knees and held her head in her hands. She began to panic as the door showed signs of yielding to the attacker. Any rational thought had been replaced by terror as she let out an ear-splitting scream. All of a sudden, the banging ceased. Toby stopped barking. Everything was still. Chloe needed to get help. Running out of the door was an option, but what if the attacker was there waiting for her? Her best option was to call someone. The police? Jim? It didn't matter. The phone lay at the foot of the back door where she had dropped it in fright. Unsure if the attacker might still be out there, she edged inch by inch to the damaged frame, daring not to breathe as if the door itself would notice her and come to life. Keeping as far away as she could, Chloe stretched out her hand, then, with a fast motion, grabbed the receiver. A doorbell rang and gave her a start. She realized it was the front door. Was it the attacker or a friend? Running to the front door, Chloe placed her eye on the spy hole and looked through. She smiled with relief to see a friendly face on the other side. Unbolting the door in a hurry, she raced to let her rescuer in. "Oh, Colin, it's so good to see—" Chloe lost the words to finish her sentence. As she opened the door, she saw Punch stood in front of her, holding Colin's decapitated head by the hair. Blood still dribbled from the crudely severed neck. The babysitter walked backwards, falling over her own feet, and landed heavily on the floor. Within an instant, Toby launched himself at the costume killer, but before he could land an attack, he was knocked to the floor, hit in midair by Punch's bat. Toby had no time to get to his paws, as Punch immediately set on him. Chloe watched, transfixed in horror, as Punch pulverized the poor animal to a bloody paste. "Well, well, well, if it isn't Pippa!" He turned to the girl. "You ruined my life." "I'm not Pippa," Chloe protested. "Lies! I thought you would have grown out of them by now," he screamed as he swung his bat, his mind confused and clouded by bloodlust. Chloe dodged his weapon as it just missed her and crashed onto the kitchen surface. Her pathway to the front door was blocked, but if she could get through the already broken back door, she could escape. Sprinting on her heels, she ran to the back of the house. Punch gave chase and caught her ankle with his bat. She tripped and fell into the conservatory, crashing into shelves lined with tools and spilling their contents to the floor. Picking up a handful of nails that had fallen out of a box, she threw them at Punch. They bounced off him with little effect. "You've hurt me once already," he taunted. "You couldn't possibly do me any more damage, you little bitch." The phone began to ring in the kitchen. Chloe looked across to the receiver. She was cornered in the conservatory, and the only way to it was through Punch. He swung at the young girl and struck her, knocking her to the floor. "No one can save you now," he roared. He stood above the defenseless babysitter as blood streamed from a cut across her forehead. She was conscious, but dazed. He raised his bat above his head, ready to take his revenge, when the answer phone started up. That was an excerpt from Punch by J.R. Park, available on iTunes or for free with a trial subscription from Audible. Click on the links in the description to check it out. Once again, thanks for listening.